And if you're ready, I'll start right now. I think it's exactly 1:20, right?
Yeah, go right ahead, Jim.
Great.
And just really quickly, this is Jim Eganreiter from Virginia Tech, and Jim, you can you can say more about the lab there.
Oh, sure, sure. So yes, I work in the Falls Church campus, which is a graduate campus of Virginia Tech. It's one of seven and soon eight campuses of Virginia Tech in Northern Virginia. And I actually work in three different colleges within Virginia Tech. The College of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences, where I'm on the education and leadership faculty, but then um, I run a lab called the Think a Bit Lab, where actually most of the schools here today typically visit in a normal year, where we work on microelectronics. But then I'm also a professor in the College of Natural Resources, where I'm part of the Center for Leadership and Global Sustainability, and I teach biodiversity stewardship and watersheds system stewardship. And I'm actually going to combine a lot of those things all into one presentation. So to do that, I'm going to share my screen and go to just a blank browser window. And let's make sure you see this. Yes, it's a regular browser window. I happen to be using Chrome, and I generally find Chrome to be the best at using other Google products. We're going to use Google My Maps. So you can simply Google My Maps, just like that, or you can just make it two separate words, however you wish. And when I do that, it gives me the option of going to Google Maps or Google My Maps. And when I click on that, you get this screen. Now, here's another secret. You can just go to Google Maps and then put a /D at the end, and it takes you to the same place. So I'm going to put that in the chat right now, if I can access my chat, and type that in for you. So it would be www.google.com/maps/D. And hopefully I typed that well. And if you click on that, it should take you to a page very similar to mine. You probably won't have this many maps up here because I make maps all the time. Google My Maps is different than Google Maps. It has a lot of the same functionality as Google Maps, but you can create your own maps, and you can also do techniques and strategies that would otherwise require much more expensive or complex geographic information systems software like ArcGIS, which is a tremendous tool. If you're already familiar with ArcGIS, terrific. But I promise you'll still enjoy knowing about this because it is a great way to teach GIS to others and have people building maps within 20 minutes, just like you're going to do today. So when I get to this screen, I'm going to create a new map. And it gives me a blank template here, and you'll see it generally orients you to wherever you are in the world. We're in the United States. I can zoom way in here to the Washington, D.C. area and then start getting specific. One thing I can do is to simply use this draw a line tool and create a line or a shape or a driving route or a bicycling route or a walking route and measure distance. So if you wanted to go to, say, a nature center and measure how long a particular hike would be, you can use this tool. You can also make a shape that measures not only distance but area. And that's what I'd like to do first here today. Before I do that, I'm going to take you to one of my favorite places to demonstrate my maps, and that's near Swanton, Maryland. It's in the uppermost part of the Potomac watershed. And I'll zoom out just so you can see where it is. This is Deep Creek Lake, which is actually part of the Youghiogheny, Monongahela, Ohio River, and Mississippi River drainage. Right over here is the Jennings Randolph Reservoir. Didn't mean to put a dot there. And if I zoom a little bit further out, you'll see the Savage River Reservoir. And these reservoirs are backup water for the Washington, D.C. area, Fairfax County, Arlington County, and others in the event of droughts. They release water in a controlled way. But here's why I want to bring you to this area. Let me get rid of this line drawing and go to this hand that allows me to move things around. I'm going to come over here and switch the base map to a terrain view. You can see you have 9 different options for maps. Satellite, terrain is the one I want to choose. When I do that, you'll start to see the dramatic topographical features of this area. And I'm going to come up here. There's a road called Bittinger Road, and it's enumerated 495 like our Beltway, but it is different. And if you look at this area up here around the Savage River Reservoir, you'll see a couple of stretches of road where it's on the top of a ridge. And in many cases, this is the Eastern Continental Divide. What's really cool about this to me is, and I don't want you to do this, but if you're driving, say, south on this road and you threw a glass of water out the passenger side of your car, that water would eventually go to the Gulf of Mexico. And if you did the opposite and threw that water out the driver's side of the window, it would go to the Chesapeake Bay. The road is right on top of the ridge there. But the reason I brought you here is to actually show you how this tool can be used to measure the area of a watershed. Because we talk about watersheds as the land and all the rainfall that falls on that area and all its groundwater, etc. So I really like to measure micro watersheds, some of which don't even have names. But we're going to measure, how about if we measure this one, Double Lick Run, which flows into the middle fork of the Crabtree Creek that eventually flows into the Savage River, then the Potomac River, specifically the North Branch of the Potomac. Now, to measure a watershed, I want you to keep in mind all the rainwater that would fall onto a specific area of land and would ultimately flow into that stream that provides the name for the watershed. So I come up here and I grab that same tool I mentioned earlier, where I add a line or a shape. And I'm going to come right down here to the mouth of that watershed. And I'm going to connect all the high points in this area. And I'm going to draw lines. You see how these peaks are. And I apologize to those of you who might be new to topographical maps. And I really don't have the necessary time to go into how topographical maps work. But they are designed to reveal the topography or the profile of this land. And I can start connecting all these high points that surround Double Lick Run. And I'll keep coming up here. And then it looks like I come the whole way up to here. And then I start connecting right along this road. And then it looks like I come over here and here. And then it looks like I actually come the whole way over to here and here, then back to here. And I've now enclosed what's called a polygon, meaning, a multi-sided area or shape. And when I do that, it asks me to name this, and I'm going to name it Double Lick Watershed. And when I save it, watch what happens. It tells me the perimeter is 4.56 miles. And it also tells me it's 1.13 square miles. With that information, and the knowledge of, say, a past rainfall event, I can predict how much water will appear in Double Lick Run and how much it adds to Middle Fork of the Crabtree Creek and ultimately the North Branch of the Potomac and the main stem of the Potomac. You can do this on a much larger scale too. Very nice tool to work with. I want to show you another really cool tool associated with this. And for that, I'm going to zoom way, way out. This also shows how our maps have bias built into them. I'm going to now make a shape around Greenland. And I'm going to do this quickly and roughly without a lot of precision. And when I do that, I can now drag Greenland around the world, and you'll see as I get closer to the equator, it's much smaller. That's because our maps are biased to the part of the world that we live in or humans have typically lived in, especially those who make the maps. So Greenland isn't quite as large as it seems to appear on our maps. When we shrink it here, you'll see it's still pretty large. It's probably the equivalent in area of Alaska, but it's not nearly as big as you start moving it around and comparing it to other places in other countries. A big feature, however, that I wish to show you is how you can add geographic information systems layers. So I happen to have this really nice spreadsheet I developed, and I'm going to pull it into my screen now. And it has the name of schools that I work with on environmental topics. I put my lab right at the very top. I have the mailing address, a lead teacher there, email, phone number, school district, and this last column, distance from me. I actually built this with a really cool tool that you can get in Google Sheets called equals driving miles, and then you can compare two addresses on your sheet. So, knowing that I have this spreadsheet in place, I can come back to my map. I'm already zoomed in here to the Washington, D.C. area where we're all located. I'll come over here and add a layer. When I do that, it prompts me to import that layer. And when I click on import, I can now upload a file, or I can go to my Google Drive. And when I go to my Google Drive, I know I have that file called School Environmental. And right there, it pops up at the top, and I click on that. And it says, choose the columns you wish to position your place marks. I want to use the mailing address for that. I'll tell you a secret though, when you're using Google Maps, if you simply put the name of the school, Google Maps does all your homework and it finds the address for it. But if you go to, say, Riverside Elementary School, you're going to find there may be 30 or 40 Riverside Elementary schools throughout North America, and you'll see a dot appear on your map for each one of those. I have picked the specific location of these schools for this purpose. You'll see this, all those columns I mentioned when I reviewed that spreadsheet, the name of the school, the teacher, the email, phone, school district, or the distance. I'll now click continue. And this asks for which column I want to use to title the markers I'm going to place on that map. So in this case, I'll now choose the name of the school. And then I'll click finish. And when I do that, sometimes takes a few seconds. Oh, it looks like it zoomed way out. I'll zoom way back in here. And when I do, you start to see all these schools popping up. Now, because I want to know how far all these schools are from me, I'm going to go find myself here. And I'm really close to this area where Route 66 meets Route 7, right at the Virginia Tech campus. And if I click on that, you'll see it's me. And all my data shows right up there from my spreadsheet. I can add more data to my spreadsheet and it will show up here also. And of course, it says distance from me 0 miles. But if I go right over here to Haycock Elementary and click on it, it shows it's 1.1 miles away. I can come, I might have to zoom out to find some other schools. Here's Yorktown High School. Here's Arlington Traditional School. Way out here, only 9 miles away, is Providence Elementary, and not too far from it, I believe, is going to be Lanier, yes. And you'll see that I created a map of things that are important to me. I could do this with my favorite hiking trails. I could do it with my favorite nature centers. I could look for my favorite restaurants. I could do all sorts of things. I could maybe make a map of wildlife rehabilitators, which is a very important thing to know about this time of the year when you start to find um, recently born animals that may have fallen from a nest or been left behind temporarily by their parents, and you can find people who can take care of it. So this is just a really great way to introduce people to geographic information systems that you can create yourself, as well as maps of all sorts. So I did that very quickly, and one thing I told Kurt that I would do is make a video of this, or maybe we could even make a video excerpt of this that can be put on the C's website or Nova Outside's website. And you can then play it back on one side of your screen, pause, rewind, and as you try it yourself. If I moved a little too fast, just because I was striving to fit this into 20 minutes. We have 3 minutes left of our 20 minutes if anybody wants to ask specific questions. I will tell you that this is difficult to do on an iPad. You'll probably prefer using a laptop or a desktop that has a mouse, and even better, a USB mouse that you might connect, although you're all quite proficient using a laptop mouse, I'm sure. Jim, can you import images in the same layer as the address? Yes, you can. And that is a terrific thing. So I could go back and get an image of each of those schools. I actually built something for the Army once with this when one of my hobbies is building expedition vehicles. And I just happened to drive my expedition truck and stop at the coffee shop I go to every day on the way out of town. And two people I regularly see for coffee are both generals in the Army, and specifically to the Army Historical Society. And they asked about my truck, and I said, I like to find adventurous routes to go different places, and I don't like to get stuck there. And he said, well, we want to create Braddock's March from Alexandria to Fort Duquesne in Pittsburgh. And I said, oh, well, I run a research farm on weekends, and I travel much of that route every single weekend there and back. So I built a map using this with not only pictures of each area, but pictures of all the historical markers on the way where Braddock's troops camped, had battles or skirmishes, and other things. And I provided it to these folks to help them with their planning. Next thing I know, I got homework. Somebody ordered something for me from Amazon, and it was a book about this thick from the Citadel with all of the details of Braddock's last march. And I'm still sorting through that book to gather facts to build into that map. But it's an example of how you can add lots of not just photos, but videos as well. And because we live in a very historic area, that's possible. Now, I see someone also asked if multiple students can collaborate, and I believe that's true. All you have to do, I'm going to share my screen briefly, is go over here and click on share. And first you have to name it. I forgot to do that. I'll call this C's 2021. Okay. And then this gives me a chance to link it, but I think I can then simply share this into my Google Drive so that others can do it that way. And let me just see, I'll do an experiment with Kurt. And I can make him an editor. I can make him a viewer. It doesn't have all the features of other sharing where you can make somebody a commenter. And then I can choose to send a message to Kurt saying, hey, you're welcome to add ideas and features to this map. And let me just make sure there's nothing else in the chat. Looks like there might be others.
Thanks for sharing that to me, Jim.
Anyway, the collaborative mapping is a great idea for, in order to build a map like that, you have to have an understanding of whatever you're studying that's multidimensional as well. And understanding the geography of the things that we study in nature is tremendously important just because of some of the features you witnessed here today. Topography of the land, proximity to things like waste management facilities, or upstream influences on a watershed, you name it. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Jim.